So, who's ready to get started? Alrighty. Oh, let me move this for a second so that I really hate that I'm gonna be tinier, but that's okay. That's okay. Alright, so we're going to talk about the Tomb of Meketre and specifically all the different objects that were found within it. We're going to talk about the tomb and how it was discovered, but let's first talk about who was Meketre. So Meketre, you can see here, right here in the center, and this little guy right here. And these are some of the models that we're going to talk about today. Meketre was a chancellor and high steward during the reigns of Mentuhotep II, Mentuhotep III, and perhaps Amenemhat I in the Middle Kingdom. This is all about in the 11th dynasty. His name is first attested on a rock inscription in Wadi Shat el Regala, which bears the title of the sealer. It only has that, even though he has multiple titles. This inscription dates to the 41st year of the reign of Mentuhotep II, indicating that this is definitely the first pharaoh that he was working under. He is also seen in Deir al-Bahri in another tomb setting with the title of Chancellor. In his tomb, he is actually only referred to as the High Steward, except for one statue of himself which has the title of Chancellor. So that probably indicates that he probably became Chancellor later in life when he had already been making a lot of these models and these statues and pieces of himself prior to him getting that title. Probably spent most of his life as a High Steward and then got Chancellor kind of at the very end. His name can be translated into "the sun is my protection." And we actually don't know that much about his family life because most of the texts in his tomb were highly destroyed. We do know that he has a son named Antef, and he is frequently depicted on these models. Presumably there's usually a person sitting immediately next to Meketre, and that we are going to most likely presume to be his son, Antef. So, how was his tomb found? Sorry, I realized I had the cropped version. No, wait. Sorry. I'm switching this around. Yeah, sorry. I want this one. I've been doing the wrong thing. Whoop. There we go. Now I can fit a little bit bigger. It's cropped out. No, not personally, friend at arms. Commissioning, most likely. Commissioning artists to be making those. But the other things is that, I mean, honestly, I'll say this, friend at arms, we don't 100% know. You can't 100% know that he was not making these personally, but we can probably assume he was not, and that he was going and getting them commissioned by artisans that would make these. But the other thing is that you had to start making these things before you died. If you wanted these for your afterlife, you could not, at the maximum, if you were a pharaoh, which is probably the most likely, your body would be laid out for about 40 to 70 days potentially, and that would give your loved ones enough time to organize anything that is going into your tomb. 40 to 70 days is not necessarily enough to make these. You might be able to make these ones, but in the kind of grand scheme of pharaohs, you wouldn't be able to make the massive amounts of things that would be put into a tomb in that time period. So often you are making things that are meant for your tomb earlier, as well as designing your own tomb. And then you're also potentially using things that were in your daily life that you were using. Also, I forgot to do the libation from Lou. Thank you. There are no hieroglyphs inside the pyramids, if you're talking about the pyramids of Giza. Otherwise, the pyramids in everywhere else in the Middle Kingdom tombs are highly translatable. And they are. They're called the pyramid texts because we can actually read them. So there wasn't a Middle Kingdom hobby shop where your widow could pop in and buy a bunch. Oh no, that's definitely highly possible. I think it definitely is honestly possible. Like, yeah, you could. That's the other. That I guess that is another good point. Like, we do know that there are some things. So technically, the different models. No, go back. The different models here. I don't think they are labeled with hieroglyphs. So, I think technically there is evidence in some certain instances where these things are being mass produced for that purpose. But if we're talking about a pharaoh, everything is going to be customized and stuff, and that is going to take time. But I would say, honestly, I don't think that a lot of these are labeled with hieroglyphs saying, like, this is Meketre. Technically, this is going to be a generic boat model, and so there is a high possibility that they were made en masse for anyone, and that a widow could go in and purchase things. So that is a very, very good point. I didn't think about that, but I know, but it's not a joke that's funny, unfortunately, and not clear. I know, but it's not a funny joke when there are readable things in the pyramids. I don't really mess with, like, those just aren't funny. Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't really mess with things when, like, oh, I did get it just now. They're encrypted. I did just get that. Yeah, see, unfortunately, some of these things go right over my head, especially when I'm thinking that... That is true. That is true. Okay, I admit. I apologize. That is a joke. That is a funny joke. I did not get it. I didn't read it out loud in my head. I jumped to the conclusion that it was somebody just poking fun at aliens or something. Ma Memo, the pyramid texts are a hieroglyphic text. The pyramid texts are just, there are pyramid texts, there are coffin texts, there is the Book of the Dead. I know, I'm dumb. Yeah, everyone can laugh at me for like 5 seconds. You can laugh. I didn't get the joke. I didn't get the joke. I got really defensive. I apologize. You can laugh at me. You can laugh, okay? It's just the nature of this job. I just get very defensive very easily. And try to be very honest, but I get it. I get it now. Encrypted. At least you're accepting that the pyramid is a crypt. So I'm giving you that one because most people think it's not really a tomb. So I'll give you that. But yeah, Mount Memo, there are quite a few, like, there's one, well, actually there's like 6 hieroglyphic languages, because there's Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Hieratic, Demotic. It's not a giant battery, Freya. Do not spread that rumor, please. But yeah, the pyramid texts are texts that are inside of the Middle Kingdom pyramids, like the Pyramid of Teddy, which I went inside. Okay, back to the lecture. You guys are distracting me. So how was Meketre's tomb found, and what does his tomb look like? We have kind of the overview here of the tomb, and we have the sideways view of it. I'm not doing it. See, Mal Memo on TikTok wrote it IN-cryptid. He wrote it just the word encrypted, so I didn't get it as a joke. It is a solid dad joke. I didn't read. If you had done IN-cryptid, I would have read it like that. But they just put EN encrypted, and I was like, oh, and I didn't get it. But it is a solid dad joke. I will give you that one. So his tomb is TT 280, otherwise known as Theban Tomb 280, and it is in the area of Thebes. It's on the West Bank, but it is specifically an area called Sheikh Abed El Kurna, where I literally was. This tomb is not open to the public. It wouldn't be. It's not decorated. It's not fancy. But I was literally in the area, which is very cool. So this lies actually next to a large unfinished tomb for King Mentuhotep III. And then later Amenemhet I tried to alter it as well. And so this, both of these kings had this kind of unfinished tomb very close to where this was. This is how we can tell that Meketre probably died. Nat just got the joke too. Encrypted. It's in a crypt. I thought it was a cryptology joke. Honestly, it could have been too. That's another side of this. Oh my god, I can't believe we're talking about this for so long. This is so funny to me. I'm gonna eat a chocolate almond. So, this is how we can tell that he most likely died during the reign of Amenemhet I, because Amenemhet I tried to alter the tomb that is next to this tomb. So, the tomb was originally discovered in 1895 by Georges D'Orsay, who's a French Egyptologist who worked for the Egyptian Museum in Cairo from 1887 until 1901. The tomb had been plundered in ancient times, so it was seemingly empty at the time, and he didn't really find anything inside the tomb. In 1902, the tomb was re-excavated by Robert Ludwig Mond, who was a British Egyptologist and chemist, but again, nothing much more was found. Then, in 1920, so another 18 years later, it was re-excavated by the American Egyptologist Herbert E. Winlock, who was working with the Metropolitan Museum of Art's excavation team. Now this is where they actually found something. So let's talk about the shape of the tomb. So there is essentially this very long and tall causeway as you are kind of climbing up into the mountainside. And this leads to the front of the tomb, which once was sheltered by a portico, which you can see here. You got all the different columns, and this was essentially the portico. This is the causeway coming up, and then the portico. The tomb itself then had a long corridor here, cut into the bedrock, that ends essentially in a square room. So when we look at this one, it's actually this one here. Somebody else named Intef actually added a tomb to this portico, but we're actually looking at this one specifically. Then when you go back into this little room, there was a burial shaft, a burial chamber. And it would kind of come down here. It came down this way, and then there was a burial chamber down here. But now, this entire area, this whole wall and this, were lined with a high-quality limestone and then decorated with a fine painted relief. Unfortunately, this place was looted in antiquity all the way down to the burial chamber, and pretty much everything was missing. And the walls were very much destroyed, and a lot of the pieces we could look at, but they're not interesting enough, unfortunately, are small pieces of the reliefs that have just kind of fallen off the walls. I was able to find no pictures of the inside of this tomb, which makes sense, it's 1920. Potentially there might be, but this is not, we're right before King Tutankhamun's discovery. Photography was used very, very sparingly during this time, because he didn't have really great access to it. So even though all this area was looted in antiquity, in 1920 they were actually cleaning the tomb again to take drawings, to take more detailed drawings of this tomb. And when they did, they actually found a small chamber right here in the first corridor. And this essentially, this hole goes down and then leads into a little area which has been called the Serdab of Meketre. Serdab is essentially a specialized room where typically there is a statue of the deceased. This case, there was tons and tons of models, and it's pretty much the only portion of this tomb that was preserved and saved from looters. There essentially was a small mud brick wall that really hid this entrance, and I have a quote from its discovery that I'd like to read to you guys. On looking through the first opening, we realized exactly what we had. The chamber was not, as we had first surmised, a little burial chamber made for some relative or servant of the great man. In fact, it was not a burial chamber at all, but a little secret room in which part of the tomb equipment of Meketre himself was placed. 1,000 years before his day, it had been the custom for the tombs of the wealthy to contain such a chamber, called by the modern Arabs the serdab, in which the dead man's statue was walled up. Later, it had been the custom to put beside the statue a few figures of servants at their daily tasks, eternally preparing food and drink for the dead owner of the tomb. Gradually, these servants had been multiplied and the statue of the man himself been made smaller until at last his figure had been reduced to a small scale as the servants. And this essentially is talking about how serdabs were more common in the Old Kingdom, but by the Middle Kingdom, these tomb models were very, very popular, and we're going to talk about them in a second. The contents of this room were slightly jumbled. So here you go, here's this causeway going up, and you can see this one is the hallway for his. And then this for his tomb, and then there's another corridor there. And this is one of the images of the rooms, but these are some of the better images of what they found in this room. You can see it's just a very rough little chamber. It's not decorated with anything, but we have tons and tons of amazing models that are just shoved into this little room. The contents of this room were slightly jumbled because there had been a partial ceiling collapse at one point. Probably why a lot of this stuff is kind of tipped over, and like this boat is like sticking straight up. But just from this tomb alone, you can see how archaeology has changed essentially over the 25-year span, because this room was not discovered until 1920, 25 years after it was initially discovered. And so it shows that the archaeological process is becoming more detailed, and is, especially because they were cleaning this to take photos and to take detailed plans, which in that earlier time in the late 1800s, that would not have been included as part of the process. Now, in addition to this tomb, there was a second parallel tomb built for a man named Intef, and Intef was probably a close relative of Meketre, because you would typically want to be buried near your relatives. And then on the right side of the portico, which I'm going to flip back to the images right here, right down here, to the right side of this portico, there was also a small rough tomb for a man named Wa. And he served in Meketre's household, wanted to be buried next to essentially his master. And this tomb was also mostly found intact, and along with the mummy, and the collection is mostly at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's a very interesting collection. I think I have an old blog post about Wa, about the tomb of Wa and some of the things he was found. He actually was found with a silver scarab, which is really cool. And he has a pretty cool coffin and mummy and everything. So after the 1920 excavation, the artifacts found in the tomb were divided between the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. At the time, this was a very common way of how to divide all of the finds. I already saw that. I know, that is a hell of an employee to have a silver. Silver was more rare in Egypt than gold. I already saw the Pharaoh Rocher, and that's one of my favorite all-time jokes. So Solar Bay, you're going up in my books. Pharaoh Rocher. It's literally, I have that in my in my notes when I first discovered that joke years ago. Oh, I love Pharaoh Rocher. This may sound weird, but back in the day, the finds and the archaeological material would be divided between the Egyptian Museum, the Egyptian government, and whatever organization was sponsoring the dig. That could be a university, that could be a museum, that could be an organization like the Egypt Exploration Society, and they could do with those objects with how they wanted to. The Egypt Exploration Society, for example, would take small finds and they would send it to their subscribers in the very early parts of that organization. Otherwise, museums would keep those on as at its collection and such. So this is still done in a time when France and Britain had a lot of control in Egypt, even though it was getting more and more independent. They also had a lot of positions within the Egyptian government and within the antiquities government, as well as literally being the head of the museums and stuff. So it is unclear who got to choose what objects went where, like how it was divided. We would hope that Egypt would get that final choice, but it is a little unclear. I have to do like a little bit more research to find out when the rules started to change, because all I know is that the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun really changed the game, because the Egyptians were very adamant that they wanted to keep everything. And everything from Tutankhamun's tomb, except things that were secretly taken by Howard Carter or Lord Carnarvon, stayed in Egypt. Nothing was divided between Howard Carter. Like anything that Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon had, they pretty much stole. Like in their personal collections, nothing was given to them or they were allowed to take it. Which is a hot take. Yeah. I have there's a whole series, not a whole series. There's a couple videos on my TikTok about that, because I went to a lecture at the UPenn Museum, and there's a guy who's doing research by going through Howard Carter's journals and Lord Carnarvon's journals, and all their notes about the excavation, and comparing the items that have either claimed to be from Tutankhamun's tomb that are in other museums around the world, or just looking for other pieces. And he has found quite a few pieces that have essentially gone missing from the Tutankhamun collection and have been found elsewhere. So most likely coming from Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon's stuff. Yeah, so it's a very, very interesting thing. But the other thing is that I know that the Metropolitan Museum of Art also did excavations in the 1930s after Tutankhamun, and I do believe they did continue to divide the finds, because the Metropolitan Museum of Art has so many pieces, like directly essentially from their excavations. So I don't know when that rule changed, and I don't know if Tutankhamun's was essentially an exception until the rule did change. So I gotta do a little bit more research into the laws at the time and when pretty much that division of finds was ended. Personally, I don't really mind this way of doing it, as long as we are kind of following what the Egyptians want. I am a person who personally believes that as long as everything is done legally and with the approval of the Egyptian government and other, if we're talking outside of Egypt, other groups, I believe pieces should be spread around the world so that people who do not have access to learn about Egypt have that access to go to museums and see those pieces. But I understand, like, everything has to be done with the approval of the Egyptian government and everything like that. So I don't personally mind if we could do this now, but essentially because of all the looting and all of the stealing of objects or taking of objects before it was illegal to do so, Egypt does not let any objects leave Egypt unless it's on a paid sponsored exhibition, essentially. So I don't essentially mind this. Back in the day when this was done, it was not ethical to do so because the Egyptians did not have their say over it. But if it was done now, I would not mind this, because the Egyptians would have the final say. And they would also have some sort of ownership over it, in my opinion. Like giving back loan and stuff. That is true. Yeah, they do. But you also have no idea how many things they have not on display that need a space. Like, we don't even know. I hate to say it, we don't even know as Egyptologists, we don't even know how many things that they have. But they have so many. So that's another thing about it as well. So let's get back to Meketre, but let's talk about tomb models and stuff, just in general. They do need more museums. They need way more museums. So what are tomb models exactly? Meketre's tomb itself contains 24 replicas or models of daily life in ancient Egypt. The paint on them has been preserved remarkably well, as many of the figures still have linen garments and there are still linen sails. But while we do have some smaller versions of tomb models found in the Old Kingdom, it's often just like one person doing a task, like one person grinding grain or one person making beer or something. The Old Kingdom tombs didn't necessarily need these tomb models because this is all Middle Kingdom. So Meketre comes from the 11th dynasty. He was an official during the reigns of Mentuhotep II, III, and Amenemhet I. These pieces are not from Meketre's tomb. I just pulled other Middle Kingdom tomb models to just show you guys the different versions. So the Old Kingdom didn't need the Old Kingdom pyramid. Hi Cliff, Alistair McLean. The butcher and the beer. Yes, we're gonna show so many of those from Moon Beards. This is gonna be great. You guys are gonna love this. I'm so excited. And we're also gonna show lots of cows as well. So, the Old Kingdom tombs did not need these models because most of the Old Kingdom official tombs had painted depictions of these things, of these daily life things. They don't need a model who were doing them. The Middle Kingdom tombs, some were painted, like the tombs in Beni Hassan were heavily painted and heavily decorated with these things, but a lot of them were not. It wasn't the most wealthy time that they would kind of put that much effort into it, so they would rather make these tomb models. But we're gonna say this: what the heck is a tomb model? What is the point? Why do you need these? Why do these need to be found in your tomb? Excuse me. These models were both meant to represent daily life activities that the Egyptians needed to do all the time, as well as things that the Egyptians needed to do in the afterlife. Remember, the Egyptian afterlife was very similar to real life, just in a world with the gods. And that meant that you essentially needed everything and anything that you needed in your real life. You needed those in the afterlife. Sorry, verifying TikTok live so that I don't go off. You had to eat, you had to drink, you had to sleep, you had to play. So you needed anything that you would need to do those things. So most middle-class deceased people would rely on food offerings, like bread, beer, and beef. And these would either be left in the tomb, left near the tomb, and they would be given by your living relatives. Wealthier people, you could get more. Or instead of having to continuously take from your own food supply to supply your dead relatives, you could commission a larger piece, like a tomb model, that would be eternally, potentially doing this forever, creating those food products that the person would need in the afterlife. So they could commission one of these models to make the bread, to brew the beer, to slaughter the cattle, and that would then be able to there's always a loophole with the ancient Egyptians. Absolutely. Anything to make going to the afterlife easier, they did try. I'm telling you, this is absolutely true, Freya. Absolutely. And so this was literally a way that your relatives or yourself, you could also order these for yourself, presumably, but it also could be commissioned by a relative, to be able to kind of show that no matter what, the cow will always be slaughtered. These are very similar as well to shabtis. Shabtis are these small statues and such that are meant to be servants, and they have a spell on them saying, I will serve the deceased. I will serve this person in the afterlife. I will grind my grain. I will reap the grain. But these are also essentially the exact same thing, but they are just physically actually doing that act rather than these shabtis being just little tiny statues with that writing. Yes, the dead relatives, no, actually, the dead relatives could technically eat it, but you would have to wait. But we also have evidence that if those offerings were left at a tomb, that is also the payment for priests who were living on the west side or going over to the west side where these tombs are, and they would be able to actually go out and you would have to wait a little bit for essentially the essence of all of those food products go. And you would be able to, the priest would then eat that food, and that would be their payment to make sure that the tomb is upkept, and also to make it clean, and to make sure that it's nice and well. And so they would actually eat that food. So I don't believe the dead relatives would frequently do it, but I think that's true. Not that I know of, unfortunately. No, Ushaptis were pretty much used. Well, I think Ushaptis started more closer to the Middle Kingdom. So I think these two models were mostly used in the Middle Kingdom, but you do see sometimes them in the New Kingdom in some ways. But I think Ushaptis become more important in the New Kingdom. That'd be a very good question, though, Baha, to kind of look and see when. Ushaptis are mostly kind of common all throughout time, minus the pre-dynastic period, because that's when they sacrificed actual servants. Ushaptis are a real archaeologists hide their Ushaptis behind spoopy puzzles. They do. Hello, Silver. How are you? How's Forewarned? Enjoying all the new spooky stuff? Yeah, so Ushaptis were the replacement for, I don't actually have to sacrifice my servants in the pre-dynastic period that they did for royalty. And then later you do get them, but I'm not exactly sure if, I'm pretty sure these are still, it's absolutely another loophole. Yeah. Everything's another loophole. I'm telling you, the Egyptians are just like so easy. Oh yeah, Ushaptis on eBay. I know. I kind of want to do a series. There's another TikTok user who's more into like Hellenistic history, and she does a whole series where she goes on eBay and looks at authentic, like ancient things and debunks them. And I would love to do that. Silver, ding ding ding. You are absolutely true. Yes. I'm gonna show you. I don't have like a good example of an Ushapti. Do I? No, I don't really have a good example. This is not an Ushapti, but this is kind of what they look like. Yeah, Professor Carly, she's great. This is sort of what they look like. They're essentially a little person. Ignore the tinier person underneath here. They're essentially a little person. They could be like this big to maybe a little bit bigger, and then this would be a relatively large size. They're essentially this small little figure of a person, and they often have their hands crossed. They'll often have a basket on the back of their on their back, and they might be holding a hoe in one side and like a sickle sometimes. And there will be a little spell here in the center, and the spell will read essentially like I am a Ushapti of the person, and then the person's name will be on there, and it'll say like I perform. I can't remember what the exact spell is. I'm very bad at remembering. Oh my god, sorry. I have like the burps. I can't. I can't. Pretty much remember boots. But yeah, so a Ushapti sort of looks like that. You can either call it a Ushapti or an Ushapti. There are two ways, but it's the same thing. So those were kind of individual figures that would just say, I am going to perform these tasks for the deceased in the afterlife. I am going to harvest their grain. I am going to do all of this. These two models don't have that religious spell on them, but they are essentially exactly the same thing. But they will be doing a large variety of tasks. While I believe the Ushapti spell really only talks about grain. What did I miss? Did I miss anything? So the other thing is that some of these models are going to be boats, especially this one that we're going to talk about. And these are placed here for a similar reason, but not necessarily the same reason as, say, these ones, which are talking about like daily life activities. some of the models of the boats are going to be depicting more religious things, like the journey to the afterlife on a boat, which was a very common kind of story. So some of them are going to have a more religious aspect, and they will also show potentially a statue or the mummy of the deceased getting taken on a boat. Then, of course, there are others that are going to show the act of fishing, which is going to be more of a daily life one. So, let's get back to the Tomb of Meketre. So we're going to go over quickly what are some of the objects that were found in the tomb that are not models, because most of them are models, and I wanted to show you guys some of the stuff that are not models. So again, these are coming either from the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. I'm so sorry, there's an ad break on TikTok. I'm going to drink this water. Libation time. Oh. Why is this such a long ad? Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, one more chocolate almond. Okay, so we're gonna look at some of the objects that are not models, because there are quite a few. There were no ad breaks in Egypt. So these two, they look like models, and they are very similar to models, but they are not exactly the same thing as the ones we're going to look at in a little bit. These are essentially made for a different purpose. So we have two statues of female offering bearers, which you can see here in the... why is there another ad break? Okay. Something's... I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna wait. This is a shorter one. I have it on like the lowest ads anyway. I have it like on the lowest ads anyway, because I don't, even though like I do get a little bit of revenue, but not that much from it. Okay. My like 50 cents of ad revenue, that's what I get. So there are two statues here in the middle, and there's multiple other pictures. But these are the two statues, which actually, if you were paying attention, you would see them. This one right here. There is one here in the corner of the room, and it's actually this one. It's the one that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So the one on the left is the one in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. These are my photos. These are my photos of it. And then this is the one that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Essentially, these are what we call personifications of an estate, which is a very fancy word for... Essentially, these are representing a farm or an estate that is physically giving an offering to the funerary cult of Meketre. And we can assume that Meketre may have been like their overseer or somebody that they worked with, because this is something that is like they are donating this to respect Meketre and respect him in death. So we have these two women here. Each of them are holding a live duck by the wings. And then each of them have a basket full of offerings. And there are little, I wish I could find a better picture of like what's inside of them, because these are quite tall. These essentially, the one in the Metropolitan Museum of Art is full of cuts of meat. So there's like a cow leg and other kind of cuts. And then these like conical pieces are actually bread. So then this one is bread. And so these two women are wearing these beautiful sheath dresses with this kind of feather-like pattern on it. Very similar to images you see of Isis and Nephthys. You see them wearing dresses like this all the time. So because everything was semi-evenly divided between the Egyptian Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, these are actually separated. Yes, Lou, cone bread. There are an insane amount of different shaped breads that they would make, and cone bread is some of the most popular. I don't know why, but they did. There's a lot of cone bread out there in ancient Egypt. I'm not really sure why it's blue and red and white, but it's supposed to be bread. Oh yes, their main foods are bread and beer. And this is the key thing to remember. Everyone in ancient Egypt drank beer, and everyone in ancient Egypt ate bread. At the very, very poorest level, you would eat only bread and beer. Otherwise, you would kind of move your way up to maybe a couple vegetables, and then moving your way up to a couple pieces of food, or sorry, why did I say food? Beef or meat, and then you would move it up to all of those things, pretty much. So, grain and grain, yep. Original Hojo cat, yep. Maybe they colored it? I am not sure. I'm very intrigued why they are colored it. Hi, Dapper. No, probably. No problem. I can't speak tonight. Yeah, it's pretty much bread and liquid bread. Red, white, and blue. Yes, we're gonna actually talk about the brewing process during this lecture. Yeah, so these are two of these beautiful, beautiful statues. Then we have this lovely little piece. This is also at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is essentially 4 male and female offering bringers bringing offerings again to the deceased. So again, it's kind of the same thing. This isn't representing an estate itself, but they are essentially representing people bringing offerings to the deceased. It's still doing the same thing, you know, where like these people will eternally be bringing offerings and bringing offerings and bringing offerings, but it's just slightly different than some of the daily life models that we kind of see. Very good question. Vegetables are they are semi-common. You would assume that anyone who is a farmer is going to have greater access to them. But it does seem like they ate a lot of vegetables and fruits, but it just really depends on your level in society. If you were at the lowest level, you were probably not eating very many of them, but you might be eating some of them. Probably not fruits. I would assume most vegetables, because there are orchards, but it was more common to have farms that did not include like orchards. Like they didn't have a lot of, most of their fruit are tree fruits. I can't really think of any fruits that they had that were not tree fruits. Because they had like pomegranates, dates are fruits, and those are on palm trees, date palms. I really only had. They could have, yes, but I don't really know if those are really plentiful in Egypt. I'm not really sure. So instead of little guys who come to life and row your boat around, grind your flour, these ladies were symbolic of a whole farm or village that would appear again in the afterlife. Yeah. So these are like images of like this is like literally, so like if my dad dies, let's say, or not even my dad, like let's say my boss dies. My boss dies, and this is like a symbolic version of my entire company giving him something at the end of his days, and like giving something for his afterlife. We commissioned this statue, and this is meant to represent that this woman is I'm trying to think, I keep using the wrong word, but like eternally, this person will forever be bringing you food from us and stuff. This also is slightly a way to, I always like to say it's like a little bit selfish in certain ways, because it's kind of like adding your name onto a card that's not that you didn't get anything from, sort of. It's like, it's like so like a lot of times it's like putting your name on something so that you get recognition from it. A lot of this stuff is sort of like this as well, though those ones are not, I don't think, labeled specifically, but often you'll see like the kids of a deceased person will fund a big stela, a big stone with like an image on it. Rose Fox, thanks so much for the follow. But they'll like pay for a giant stone to be carved with their dad or with their parents, and they will be pictured there, and they will have their name, and they will show all of their family and stuff. And so it's like, I need to get my name in this so that I will also get blessings from it, kind of, as well. Yeah, it is kind of weird. It's like, yeah, it's very strange. Not really Mount Memo, sort of, but not really. So here we got 2 men and 2 women. This is not labeled, but they potentially could be like the children of Meketre, possibly, but they're not labeled, so we don't have any real evidence for it, but this could be. So we got the first guy. He has a libation vessel and a giant incense burner to burn incense. The guy behind him has a giant stack of linen cloth. The woman behind him has got a live duck and a basket full of conical bread. Actually, I think it's beer bottles and conical bread. And then the lady in the back has, you can't see it in the box, but there are square loaves, and then she's got the duck in her hand. I'm not exactly sure if the perspective is supposed to be this off, because this libation vessel is quite large, and the flint thing is pretty large, but everything else is quite proportional. But I'm wondering if it's a hierarchic scale, showing that, like, these people are not important, and so the offerings are technically more important, because these also ducks. These ducks are huge in comparison to the person. So that's just something I'm wondering about. I'm not sure if it's really true. This is carved wood. Most of it is painted, but you can actually see some have linen. So this woman actually has, well, there is paint to kind of show her dress. She actually has a piece of linen wrapped around her. But these are mostly carved wood that are painted. Though I did see something that their feet are stucco to kind of help attach it to the bottom, and I actually think these ones are too, because the feet look a little bit different than the actual wood. Hi Prime, thank you. Bless you, my son, which is not what I should have done, because I'm a pharaoh, not a Catholic priest. Yeah. What is the difference between those models and the ones that look like tiny mummy boxes? The tiny mummy boxes are typically for shop teas, silver. Typically. I've mostly seen, I haven't really, there are other, anything that looks like a tiny sarcophagus is usually for a shop tea, but there might be other ones that I'm not remembering. Unless you're talking about the models that I'm going to show in a second, which do look like tiny little boxes. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, Mao. So the ducks are quite large in this photo and in this image, and so there is something called hierarchic scale, which means that the most important person in the image is going to be larger than other people. And so potentially, whenever this is done on wall paintings, the deceased person will be the most important. He will be like 100 times larger than most people. His wife will be then a little bit smaller than him, and his children will be a little bit smaller than her. And then anyone who is like an offering bearer usually will be very, very small in comparison. And then there are some times where certain objects or animals will be actually larger than those people. It's like they'll be the offerings are thus more important than the people who are carrying them, and thus will be larger. And that's what I'm wondering if what's going on in this image. Oh, I don't know that answer specifically, but I do not doubt that. I feel like it's possible, but I do not know if anything has been found. That is a very, very good question. I assume so, but teeth do tell us a lot. But we do know a lot about the ancient Egyptian diet just from images. But I might have to look that up, Prime. It's a very good question. So, because the Metropolitan Museum of Art got half of the finds, I can search their collection pretty extensively. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo does not have an online collection, so I thus cannot search to see smaller objects that are not like famous and are not on display. So these are some of the objects that are really small that are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection. You can see that there's so many small fragments of the tomb wall. Some of which are painted, some of which are not. Usually they have very small pieces of hieroglyphs, and you can see them, and most of the pictures are in black and white. So this was one of the pictures. It's unclear if the tomb walls were destroyed when it was looted, or if the tomb in general was just not in that great condition. But the majority of other pieces that are in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection that are labeled as Meketre are wall fragment of Meketre. And a lot of them don't even have pictures. They're either in black and white or they don't have pictures at all. So we also have a lot of random objects like this unfinished statuette. This piece was technically found buried at the top of the ramp, the causeway up to the tomb, so it is not clear if this is actually meant to be for Meketre's tomb. It might even be something that was left there later. It's probably supposed to be Osiris or the god Khentiamentiu, but it's unfinished, and so they drew out this because they were getting ready to carve it into it. We also have a heart scarab, again not from Meketre's tomb, probably of later use. They unfortunately didn't give a translation, which sucks. But a lot of the tombs in Thebes were reused later, during later time periods, and so you find things from later time periods on it. You also found this axe head in the tomb, which was really cool. We also had quite a few really cool papyrus fragments coming from the tomb. The one right over here, on the left, lists the number of beer, bulls, and possibly land. It's pretty fragmentary, but we can tell that there are certain words that help us determine that this is some sort of inventory or some sort of list. On the opposite side, it actually reads, account of the land which the master, life, prosperity, and health, have servant Ippi. And that's what we got. The master that is listed here might be Meketre, for whom Ippi acted as a servant, which is essentially a funerary servant. So no matter what, this is essentially an account of a funerary servant, and presumably what is getting placed in the tomb by that funerary servant during the burial. It's most likely Meketre, but it's unclear. It just says the master. It does not say anyone specific. The middle one right here is our most complete piece, and this is a letter written by someone named Necher Euhem to an unnamed recipient. This letter, there is a high possibility this is just a practice letter, which was essentially a letter that an apprentice scribe would copy from somebody else to practice his writing. But I'm going to read you the letter now, the translation. So the translation says, the servant of the estate, Necher Euhem, says, your condition is like living 1,000,000 times. May, Harep says, Lord of Heracleopolis, help you as this servant wishes. May Ptah, south of his wall, cheer with you life greatly and with good old age. May your repute be good with the Ka of Herapses, Lord of Heracleopolis. All the gods, may they make for you 1,000,000 years in life, prosperity, and health, as this servant wishes. I say, let the master, life, prosperity, and health, know that my subordinate, Netcher Eim, no, Eim is come that he may bring two Tedrep geese, together with 100 Petek birds, together with 100 dressed Ser geese, and communicate with the master, life, prosperity, and health, about having someone write to ... send Mary about giving the strong water ... And that's where it trails off. But a very interesting letter. It does sound like a blessing letter. The millions of years, that phrase that kept getting thrown out, that is something that would be used frequently to say, like, I hope you live forever in the afterlife. I hope you get 1,000,000 years is what it says quite frequently. So it is sort of a blessing letter. I think it definitely appears that it could be absolutely for Meketre. But the other thing is it is a little bit formulaic. It does sound very similar to something that a scribe might practice on. And then the last piece over on the right is unfortunately really fragmentary and is really hard to reconstruct what it said. But the few preserved pieces that you can see there imply that this was also ascribed for an account. There's a word, demjed. Yeah, demjed. That's the word for total. And that is one of the words that we can make out. And so it implies that it is some sort of account of how much beer, how much bread, how much whatever was there. Because the total is at the bottom. Okay, who wants to actually see the models that we were talking about this entire time, but not actually talking about? I love you guys, but I'm going to take this off because it's getting very annoying because it's too long. It like sits on, ow, and I apparently got all the plastic in my hair. Okay, let's talk about the actual models. Doop. Okay, we're gonna go through them individually. I might speed through these because there are a lot. First, we are going to look at the models that are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I am going to have way more information to be able to give you about what these depict because they are all on the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website and they are all very detailed descriptions. So when we get to the ones at the Museum of Cairo, unfortunately, it's going to be really hard to get a little bit, I'm sorry. I still got my Mosaic collar on, but yeah, I can't wear that in his headdress anymore. But yeah, so this is all one piece. This is a boat. This is one of the little figures that's actually underneath this canopy. So this is not just a model boat. This is not just a model boat. This is a model boat with a kitchen on it. There's a kitchen underneath that little canopy. So the whole series of boats that you will see throughout this tell a story. And this one, there is thus another boat that presumably also has a kitchen. Lou, that is very true. But I will tell you, I went on a boat when I was in Egypt last month, 2 months ago. And this man had a full hot plate with a fire. Like not a gas hot plate, not an electric hot plate, a gas hot plate, and cooked us tea on the boat. And it was inside the little cabin of this boat. And I looked at that and I said, oh no, we're going down. He was very nice, but it was genuinely terrifying when I saw him, how he was cooking the tea for us, because it was literally like this, I'm telling you. Yeah, so I forgot about this. It was so funny. So the whole series, again, all of these boats are telling a story. So there is another boat that's at the Metropolitan Museum, or that's at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, that essentially has a ton of roasted fowl, dried beef, bread, beer, and some kind of soup. This one has like the whole, like all the things that Meketre would need to eat on his boat journey. And then this one is the kitchen boat. This is the one that is cooking all of those products. So this is where the beer and the soup are being prepared. So you have underneath this little canopy, you have a guy who is literally watching a stove where the soup is simmering in that little jar. And then there's also a woman who is grinding grain. You can see her right here, I believe. Here's here's the guy watching the stove, and then this lady is grinding grain. There are also brewers inside the cabin who are shaping bread loaves and then working them through sieves into large vats to make the beer. One brewer also stands in another vat where he tramples the dates that would be used to provide the sugar for the fermentation of the beer. There's also in one section there is a blackened trough, and that may have actually contained like fake like coal for like roasting the fowl. I believe that's probably underneath the cabin because you can't really see it on this side. But yeah, very cool. It's a little kitchen boat. So then we have this boat. This is one of our papyrus boats. So with the green color of the hull and the kind of the vertical prow and this backward curving stern and then the double oars in the back, this essentially is telling us that this boat is made out of papyrus and not made out of wood. Boats like this appear in the representation of the pilgrimage to Abydos. This was an important Egyptian ritual in which you would travel to Abydos from the city of Thebes. This was the cult center of the god Osiris, and so you would need to do this travel. But you actually needed two boats. You needed one that would row northward from Thebes to Abydos, and that's the next boat that we're actually going to look at. And then this boat is one that is coming back from Abydos. What's also very obvious on this boat is when you look at this image, is you see this man standing here, or sitting here in this chair, and you think, oh, that must be Meketre. He's kind of the central figure. He's kind of underneath this canopy. But when you look at him very closely, you will realize he's actually not alive. And he's not dead either. This is actually a statue of Meketre. The way that he is standing so straight in this chair with this raised step, this is supposed to be a statue of Meketre, implying that he is dead, but that he still needs to make this journey. And we actually have, this is his son possibly sitting next to him, and then we have a couple priests with this, one with a little piece of paper that he's kind of reading or reciting, as well as a incense burner, and then this guy here is offering a leg of a cow probably to him as well. Then you go to the second papyrus boat, and this is the one that is making the trip from Thebes to Abydos. Now, when you look back, when you look back at this guy, you have this person sitting here who is like physically pushing off of the bank to be able to get back from Abydos to Thebes. Abydos, if you didn't know, is upstream from Thebes, thus north of Thebes, it is actually downstream. It is downstream of Thebes. Wouldn't he already be in the land of reeds by then? Would they call their spirit back for the travel? No, so this is potentially something that could be done in the afterlife, or this is something done in real life even after he is dead and buried. They're just taking a statue of him. I'm pretty sure this is implying a more afterlife trip than like a real life trip with you're taking the statue of your dad or something. This is kind of a more ritualized trip. Or he could have technically been going on it, and right in this image, they're just depicting him as a statue rather than that. Yeah. It's kind of hard to tell what is meant to be going on, but what you can definitely see there is he is a statue. He is not actually a person in that section. Oh wait, sorry. I scrolled back too far. So in this one, you can see him pushing off of the bank. But when you look at this one, these guys are all actively rowing. And so they are kind of actively rowing because they are they're paddling northward against the prevailing winds. Even though they are technically going downstream, and you would think it would be easier for them to sail downstream to Abydos, they have to go against the prevailing winds that are coming from the north to the south, kind of coming off of the Mediterranean. And I just love the kind of movement that you see in this piece with all of these guys sailing down and using their oars. And then you can also see the statue of Meketre in the center, again with a companion sitting next to him, probably his son. And there's also a large libation vessel, which you can see right here. The companion, and there's also 2 guards kind of behind him, but that are also the ones controlling the big oars. These are all very, very well made. And one of the things I love about them is that you can see, like, I think the wood was stained for their like skin tone, but it gives them a very interesting, like, I don't know, molted, like it's not even. And so it's something that you notice about all of the pieces from his kind of collection. You kind of see just this like very uneven skin tone, because I think that they were dyeing or staining the wood rather than like painting over it. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And a lot of these this one would have had some sort of mast. They have a very interesting mast system. Some of them are very different, but some of them are very similar. I don't know what the pole guy is either. All right. I'm getting confused with what I've talked about and what I haven't talked about. Okay, here we go. So another sailing boat. This boat is being rowed in a northernly direction, again going downstream because you're going against the prevailing winds, and so that's why you need so many different rowers here. Here you have a kind of small cabin in the center that leaves room for 18 different rowers. And Meketre here is seated at the prow. In this case, he is seen alive, and he has this closed lotus flower that he is bringing up to his nose. And then this man over here, who's kind of putting his arms like this in front of him, is probably like the boat captain. He's probably like giving respect to Meketre being his boss, kind of. Yeah, Prime Operative. This is in certain ways, this is a very, very well-preserved tomb, even though it was mainly looted. But this room is, if you have the chance to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and see some of these pieces, or go into the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and see the other half of this collection, it is mind-blowing how beautiful these pieces are. Yeah, they have a very interesting, all of these masts are very different. Some of the boats are very different, and the papyrus boats as well. They are not going to have a mast because they're not strong enough to kind of have one. But even then, these are highly accurate. That's the very interesting part, is that these should be highly accurate to actually how boats during the Middle Kingdom were made and used. Although we don't have an image of it, but inside the little cabin, there's actually a trunk, and it's being guarded by a servant, which is very cool. The next one, there's still more. There's so many more that we have to go over. So this is the boat with the musicians on it. So here we also have Meketre standing here in the center, and he is also smelling another lotus blossom. He's kind of sitting in the shade of the cabin of this boat. The cabin here would have been made out of a light wooden framework with linen or leather hangings. And what's very interesting is when you look very closely, it's hard to see from these images, unfortunately, but the leather hangings in this are actually rolled up to kind of let the breeze into the cabin in the front. And then you also have these wooden shields. Oh, actually, no, here you go. Here you see it. There's the rolled up piece of leather, so that it allows this kind of airflow. You can kind of see it. It's very hard to see, but you can, because these are the Metropolitan Museum of Art's websites, you can actually like, oh yeah, Mao. Yeah, if you go to Wikimedia Commons, they have a ton of these images and stuff, and you can zoom in very closely. Even if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website and look at these, you can zoom into these very closely. We might go into it a little later if we have some time at the end. But yeah, so they kind of make a little window that rolls up a piece of the leather so that they can actually look through it. There's also, up at the top, there are these wooden shields that are painted on each side of the cabin roof. There are 2 little figures that are standing immediately next to, on either side of Meketre, and you can see them up here in the corner. He was a high official. So he at one point was high steward, and then he later became a chancellor. So he was a relatively wealthy person during his time. So the two musicians are a singer here who has kind of his hand up to his lips, and then this man who is a harper. So he's playing a harp. Apparently he is blind. I'm not sure how the Metropolitan Museum of Art was able to determine that, but apparently he's blind. He might not have eyes. It's hard to see on the image. There may not be any painted eyes. And then there is again another ship captain who is paying homage to Meketre. And then here at the front of the boat, we have this guy who is using a weighted line to determine how deep the river is as they move along. Next one. Okay, so I like this one a lot. So this is a boat, unlike the other ones, which are kind of a little bit more ritualistic and kind of just showing, like potentially showing the daily life with the musicians and like the kitchen, but then the ritual ones, better than usual touch and hearing. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, the Met has very, very high-res pics of these, so you can scroll in to see them. When we get to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there are very little images. There are a couple on Wikimedia Commons that are the ones from Cairo, but not a lot. You kind of have to Google them, but it's really hard to find, unfortunately. Do I have issues? No, I don't. Okay. Sorry, when I talk so much, my nose gets stuffed up. Blind harper is a trope. Yeah, I'm wondering if that might be I'm wondering if that might be part of it a little bit, but yeah, I do not know. I am unclear on that. I'd have to look a little bit more deeper into that. So this one is kind of one of the more sporting boats, because you have Meketre here in the center, possibly a statue of him. It's kind of unclear, but it looks similar to the ones that have a statue of him. Possibly his son then sitting next to him, and they are kind of sitting under a very small little shelter, possibly made out of woven reeds, and then again decorated with two large shields. But they're also kind of holding harpoons here on the side, I believe. In the prow, we have two men aiming harpoons at some fish, while some other fishermen are removing a harpoon from a bolty fish. They also have like what type of fish they are, and I'm like, I don't know anything about fish. Some of them, yeah, so Mao, some of them have painted clothing, and then some of them are both painted and then draped in actual pieces of linen. It's unclear if like everyone was draped in linen and just some of the linen did not survive, or if only certain people were draped in linen. Like you can see like these two guys here, all of these guys here are draped in linen, but everyone else is painted, and like this guy's not, but this guy is. It's kind of unclear, but a lot of them do have linen pieces still surviving. Where was I? So then you have an earlier catch of, I think this is what it is. It's called a Mormiris, or no, that one's being presented. So I think these are Mormiris fish, I think, and because they're being presented. They're being presented to Meketre. And then there's a bunch of coots. Apparently that's a fish I've never heard of before. And they are caught previously in a clap net, are also being presented. And it is very interesting. This is one of the only boats that actually has a woman on it. You can see this woman here. She is presenting one of the fish to him. But it is not uncommon in the Middle Kingdom to show a depiction of it, what we call a marsh scene, where essentially the deceased person is on a boat with their wife and with their children, and they are hunting in the marsh. So this might be a more like physical image of that same image that you would find on tomb walls during the same time period. Yeah, so we got, I think they look like ducks, but I think these are supposed to be fish on a string. You got this one who I think is on a harpoon string, and I think there's, oh, this woman was holding a duck. It's so hard to see, but yeah, this woman is actually holding a duck. So maybe these are ducks. I have no idea. They might be. This might be a marsh scene in total. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, we are done with the boats that are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now let us look at the models, the actual, like, building models. Oh, boat racing. That's a very good question. I don't know. I don't think I've seen anything where they have boat races. So, the models, I like the boats, but the models are better. So, we have, these are the actual model rooms, and they are all in these tiny little models. So, this is a stable for cows. Oh, there's an ad break. I'm gonna snooze this. Let's snooze for 5 minutes. So this is a stable, and unfortunately these cows are being fattened for slaughter. Unfortunately, I apologize. But we have 4 oxen here in this stall, and they're all eating kind of out of this trough. And then we have 2 being hand fed over here. And then you can kind of see on this side, there's like a pile of fodder and a bag of grain. And sadly, this one right here, this black cow, is so fat that they are, it can hardly stand. So it's lying down and being hand fed. It's very cute, but it's kind of sad. My favorite parts about these 2 models is that they have doors and they have windows frequently, and some of them even have roofs. Yeah, burger and beer. Yeah, definitely. So you can, you can literally see like the little door, and you can see this is like a door lock, so that when you close this door, you could turn that so that the door doesn't fly open, which is just wild. It's like, why would you put so much detail into it? And there's even one in here too, because there's a separate door that you go through to get into the second room. It's like amazing. So as a lot of these models will show, they will literally show the process of any of these things being made. Friend at Arms, I am so sorry that I'm going to ruin that for you. But here's the slaughterhouse. Again, it's showing the entire process. So you have one room that is the stable, and we have one room that is the slaughterhouse. I'm sorry, that was too good. I hate to say that was perfect that you could have said that. But this is not just the beef slaughterhouse. This is also all the animal slaughterhouse. So, but this room, oh my god, is so fascinating to look at. So, this piece actually came with a roof where you can see like the little pegs coming in. But this part right here is actually a window. So where this image is being taken from, it's actually from a window looking into it. And again, like, look, they have like a working door. They have little doors. They have the little ladder step. Like, it is very detailed, and it is just so amazing. Which one, Mom Memo? Because most of the red is still red. I know. And that's the kind of funny thing is, like, these are 2 models. These are things that technically no one would be allowed to, like, play with, but I would have loved to play with these. They would have been so much fun. So what we have are, we have the 2 oxen being slaughtered in the large hall. Their legs are tied together, and their throats are being slit by these 2 guys over here. And then there is a separate dude that is holding a bowl to actually catch all of the blood. And then these guys in the corner are boiling the blood to make a pudding, which is the word that they use, and I don't know if it's the right word. But they're boiling it for some reason. Because the red looks brown. Yeah, so it sort of looks brown, but it's a reddish brown. But yeah, this is red. They're not the poles here are probably supposed to be red, but you can see that like this cow has like a line of red over his neck. Yeah, I guess they do look a little bit brown. It might have oxidized slightly, but this is still pretty red. They were probably using like raw like iron sort of like to be able to get the red color, which is a much more rusty red than a bright red. But yeah, it might have oxidized a little bit to be brown, but these are also supposed to be the meats. They could have meant to be brown. What else is there? Oh, we also have an overseer. I'm assuming this guy over here, who's watching everything, and the clerk, and they're holding batons and kind of watching over the scene. And then we also have this guy over here in the corner, the guy with the black wig. He is plucking a goose. He's plucking a goose. So this is also meant to be a slaughterhouse for other animals. All right, there's that. Prime operative, this would not have really been used for educating children because these were only found in tombs. If you could presume that they would be used for educating children, they would have been found in other places, not just tombs. I agree, friend in arms. Okay, Lou, no problem. We still got quite a few to go through. I agree, friend in arms. These are too detailed. We have other models. These are the best models that we have. Literally, these are the best models that have been found archaeologically. These are going to be like the highest of the high models. So, they are not, these are probably very expensive in the way to think of it like that. Did I say anything? So yeah, the last thing is like, you can see all these different cuts of meat drying. The cord is the only thing in this that is not ancient. They had to replace the cord with all of the pieces of meat hanging down, but everything else is as it was. Why is there another freaking ad? Oh, I have to fix my ads. They must have updated something. It's very strange. I'm sorry about the other ad. They must have updated something. Yeah, being an artist in ancient Egypt would probably be great. I would probably really love it. All right, let's look at the next one. This is one of my personal favorites. So this is the granary. So this is one of the things that would have helped make food for Meketre in the afterlife. This is where they would have been sorting and counting the grain, which would later make the bread and the beer that Meketre would need to survive. So the interior room is divided into two sections. You have the granary on the right over here, where they're storing all of the different grains, literally pouring out all the little buckets and baskets and such. Then you have the office, the accounting office, which you can see right here. The keeping track of your grain supply was crucial in this society, especially when grain is often everyone's pay for work, or in their barter system. You would get paid with grain so that you can later make it into bread or beer, or send it off to get made into bread and beer, which would then be your food supply. So keeping track of it is extremely important in ancient Egypt. So we have these men who are taking the grain and they're pouring it into these 3 little compartments. There's even more guys coming in with grain. Then you have these different scribes, and so you have 2 scribes that are writing on papyrus here, and then 2 scribes who are writing on like wooden boards. And one of my favorite things is that each of these guys has their own tiny little writing palette, which is just like so cute, and I just love them. And then as well as I love that like there actually was grain, I think, found in this, not a lot, but like a little bit of bits found within it. And so actually kind of putting some of that grain in the grain model is just like way too cool. Shout out to accountants. But yeah, this is one of my favorites. I love these little scribes. I love them so much. So as we have the granary, we have the brewer / the bakery. So it's actually a combined brewery and bakery, because they're both made out of the grain that you need. So in the brewery, which is on this side of the room, unfortunately they have these little sections, so it's a little bit hard to see into it. I didn't get a good picture of the brewery, but we can maybe go into the Met's website and look at it. But these are some pictures of the guys in the brewery, and then these are some pictures of the guys in the bakery, and you can see these guys as well. So let's talk about the brewery process very briefly, and I'm only recording this off of what the Met's website said. So in the brewery, you got some men crushing the grain with a pestle, and then women who are grinding it into flour. And then there's another man who lumps it into dough, and then he might even add yeast because there is like a weird square basin in the corner that they would be able to do. I don't know, Hojo Cat. That's a very good question. I do not know where any of each of those natively grow. They aren't even really using wheat. They are only using barley and emmer. The modern day wheat that we know was not available to the Egyptians. They were mainly using barley and emmer. So I do not know where malt or hops natively grows around the world, and so I do not know if they were accessible to the Egyptians. I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure they were just using, and this is the other thing, is that this is not real beer, if this makes sense. This is not real beer. This is a very, very low alcohol content. Okay, yeah, so it might have a more malty taste. But yeah, this is not going to be actual beer. This is going to not be really that alcoholic. It is essentially something that the ancient Egyptians trusted to drink more than the water that was around them. All ancient cultures drank beer for non-alcoholic reasons, pretty much. The fermenting process essentially made it better so that you didn't have to. Also, it made it more nutritious in a weird way. But yeah, so maybe malt, but not in the same way as actual alcohol. So a man would lump that into the dough. He might add a little bit of yeast to it. And then there was water added to the dough, and then the mash was then stepped on in a tall vat. Some guy like got in and started stepping on it. The liquid is then set aside in 4 tall crocks to ferment. And then finally you would pour that into the round jugs, which you can see what this guy is doing, and then covered with a black clay stopper. Yes, it is much more healthy to drink than the unboiled river water. Absolutely. So that's the brief brewing process. And then in the bakery, you have 2 separate rooms, which you can see here. You can see 2 different guys doing it. So this guy here, he is crushing that grain in something that's very interestingly like set into the floor, which is interesting. Then they, I'm trying to see if I can see it. So the man crushes the grain into a pestle while there are female millers who are grinding it further into a flour. Then you have the 2 men who are mixing the dough in tall tubs. And then you have the guys standing next to the little ovens. And this guy is tending to it with like a poker, which is really cute. In the second room, you have these. This is the image of the second room. You have the two men. Oh my god, I'm losing my space. Oh yeah, in the middle of this room there is also a basket full of bread. I just can't see it. So you have the two guys who are crushing the grain with the pestles, and then you have these two guys who are making loaves into various shapes while these guys are standing over by the oven. Honestly, my favorite part of this tomb is the guys who are making the dough, and they are like, their hands are covered in flour. Like they've literally given them little white hands, and I think that's just such a cute detail that like they didn't need to do. Oh, it's so pretty. I just love this piece so much. Alrighty, so this is again this is one of my personal favorites. It is one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen, and it also just tells us so much about ancient Egyptian architecture, which is amazing. So this is a model of a garden, and a house, pretty much. So in the center of the garden here is a pond that is surrounded by sycamore figs, with red figs growing in the trees. You can kind of see them. They're a little small. The pond is actually lined with copper and could actually be filled with water. Probably wasn't, but could actually be filled with water. There are even, if you look at the roof of this portico, there are even irrigation spouts on the roof for the occasional time that it rains in Egypt. But honestly, it tells me that it probably rained enough in Egypt that it is important enough to put irrigation spouts on the roofs, which I think is amazing. The roof is held up by 2 rows of columns made up of palm trunks with the lotiform or lotus form capitals up at the top. And then the rear ones, which are hard to see, they have actually papyriform capitals, so looking like a papyrus stalk. And then in the back of the portico, it's again hard to see, there are 2 doors and a lattice window, which are depicted in more detail on the opposite side of the model, which is literally what the description says, and then they don't show you what the opposite side of the model looks like in any of the pictures, which is very annoying. Now, these may be linked to the so-called soul houses, which were essentially clay models of houses with representations of offerings in the forecourts of those houses. But this also could be a simply what Meketre's house looked like, or maybe what his favorite place looked like, or somewhere that he had been to kind of show what life is like, and he wanted to like represent something in his afterlife, because this has no people in it. Like, I think that's like the most fascinating part about it is like this has no people in it. So what is the purpose of this piece? Is this purpose supposed to be representing a place where people can leave offerings for you, or is this meant to be a peaceful place that he loved and that he wants to take with him to the afterlife? Which I think is just like a beautiful sentiment, to be honest. It's just so beautiful. I remember seeing it for the first time. It's just one of the most beautiful things. Yeah, it does. It does. Alrighty. We are now done with all of the pieces that are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So let's move on to the things that are at the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. I will also say, I think I got photos of everything, but I don't have as much good information about these pieces, if they are different, just because they don't have a collection online, so I can't take their words as mine in my research. I'm kind of just going off of what I can see from these images. But a lot of these are my own pictures, like these. I think all of these are my own pictures. This one on the side might not be. One of these are my own. At least 2 of these are my own. So let's look at the boats, because there are more boats. There are many, many more boats. Probably. Yeah, more like kombucha. Yeah, absolutely. Probably much, much closer to that strength, for sure. So, these boats are very interesting because they are connected together as like one model with this piece at the bottom, but also connected by this little net. Again, the green color of the boat and these lines that you can see all going up and down it implies that this is a papyrus boat. Both of these are papyrus. And usually these are made out of strips of papyrus rushes that are tied together with cords. Now we have the oarsmen that are sitting here. There's one in the front, one in the back, one in the bow, one in the stern. And they are kind of propelling the boat forward as they are collecting a whole bunch of fish in their little net, which is just like amazing. And I love this little net. The net is actually weighed down on either side by wooden weights, and then it is attached to the boats, specifically by these guys who are holding the rope, attaching the two nets. And again, this is just showing us a really great example of how fishing worked in Egypt. One of the versions of how they would fish is just using a giant net in between two boats being propelled forward. Behind these two statues are these two massive papyrus boats, again, because again, they're green. I believe these are almost identical to the ones that are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that are depicting that journey to Abydos. It's a little unclear because I was only able to get essentially this photo, and then this is one that I took. Yeah, these are quite large. That is true. If you look at this man behind, these are quite large, large models. So it appears that this also has a statue of Meketre, and which is why I think these are potentially also the ones that are like the journey to Abydos, because they have the little cover, and they have multiple rowers and stuff. This one, then I believe this one would be the one that is coming back from Abydos, and then this one would be the one going to Abydos, because this one, from the looks of it, this one has rowers, and this one that's closest to us does not. But it has sort of like the priest giving an offering to the deceased. Then we have this one, which I think this one is one of the most different out of all of these, mostly based on how these men are depicted, because all of these ones have black wigs on, short little black cropped wigs, while most everyone on every single other boat is bald, which is honestly also unique because mostly the only people who are depicted as bald are priests. I don't know if that's what this is implying on all of these different models. There were some that had some wigs, but the majority of people are bald. I don't know if that was just like a lazy thing, like just to make them bald so it's easier and you don't have to carve like little wigs and stuff. But most people who are bald are priests. So it's a very interesting thing to ask if this is potentially like him like being like escorted by priests, and so this is very much a more, even though these are all models, they're all religious things going on. So it's one of the largest boats, and it also still has a sail preserved. It has this linen sail. There are a couple holes, but nothing that major. It's got a mast, it's got spars, it's got poles, the sail, the rigging, and oars, and it's got 15 different sailors doing a variety of tasks. The cabin in the back is open on either side, and then is again decorated with those two bull hide shields on either side. And I really wanted to see what is in the cabin because I don't know if Meketre is on this one. I haven't been able to find a good enough image to show, and I feel like if he is, he might be in the cabin because the cabin is one of the largest ones. So I'm very interested in this one because I feel like it's a little sloppier, to be honest. When I look at the figures, they're much taller and they're much thinner, and the way that their eyes are drawn and stuff, there's something sloppier about this one, and I'm not really sure if this is like an older one, maybe this is the first one that he commissioned. It's a very interesting one. I'm not really sure, because everything else looks so similar. All of the figures look very, very similar. The other thing is the skin tone. The skin tone is a shade darker than everything else. It looks like, in comparison to all of these two models and all of these boats, this one was made by someone different, is what it really looks like to me. Here's another image from it from the side. I love all these guys that are attached to the rigging. Who knows? Yeah, maybe an apprentice. Maybe he bought it earlier in his life from some other person. There's just something that's very distinctly different about this piece than the rest of them. And the sail is still preserved. Probably a lot of this cording, though. The cording is probably restored, I'm going to assume, just because linen like this can survive, but individual threads and strands don't. So that might be replaced. But when you have all of these guys sitting there in this position with holes in their little carved hands, that's how you can know, oh, well, it probably is. They're probably meant to be holding a tiny rope. Okay. Then in front of this one, you see here we have two other boats. Again, missing this kind of mast of some sort that is attached to this like big white thing. But you can see they're all consistent. All of the boats almost have that exact piece. And showing that like this is how boats were made, and this is what boats looked like at that time. I do believe this boat on the left is another kitchen tender, similar to the one at the Met, because there's this really big jar and there's this kind of thing, and it looks like something is going on. This one just looks like a regular boat. I don't think there's really anything going on here, but there's something interesting going on here, and I think this is probably the boat that has all of the meat. This may be the soup. I think this is like the soup, and this like might be this would be the beer, I believe. And so I'm wondering if like this is the boat that is carrying all the food for this long journey. And then again, so many, like these guys here, you can see all of their hands raising up like they were going to be holding all of the tiny ropes, but the sail is no longer preserved. So it would have had something else kind of attached to it that's now missing. All right, now let us go. Oh yeah, here's one more image of that. Yeah, so you can see this is definitely, oh, look at that giant symbol. I think this is definitely like a vat of beer, and I think this is the soup. So I think this is the one that's carrying the food, and then this one doesn't seem to have anything going on it, really. So now let's get into the models. Some of these models might even be better than the ones at the Met, and I wish I had better pictures. But so this is a carpentry shop, y'all. There are 12 figures in this small little room who are engaged in carpentry. Some of them are squaring up larger beams with adzes, and then planing them with flat blocks of sandstone. One beam has already been lashed vertically to the post in the center of the court, and the man is sawing it into boards. You can see this giant saw that this guy is doing. I know, isn't that weird? It's because you would assume that a carpenter is doing some of this model making, but it's literally a model of model makers making it. Ooh, that would be cool. To 3D scan some of the boats and add in some sails and ropes to see what it would have looked like. I think that'd be really cool. We also have a man who is seated he's cutting mortise holes with a mortising chisel and a mallet. There's also a group of men gathering around a fire in the corner, these guys over here, and they are actually reshaping and resharpening their metal tools in the fire. And then this big chest here in the center of the room, which you can see in this image is open, has several sets of these model tombs which are identical to the actual carpentry tools that were used during this time period, which is just genuinely wild and so cool that they would make copies of all of these amazing little things. So that is one of the cool things. I like this guy with the chisel and the hammer. It's genuinely, and this guy, oh my god, they're just so cute. I love this little position of him doing the saw. Like, oh, just so cool. This is another one of my favorites. Everything in here is my favorite. This is why we are talking about these. So this is a model of a spinning and weaving warehouse. There are a dozen women depicted in this room. We have 3 rows. I'm trying to figure out which groups. Yeah, so 3 women here. They are seated in a row preparing the flax by beating it in these semicircular small platforms. So then they would place it in a bucket that's next to them, beside each of these figures that are here spinning. So they have these spinners, you can see here, spindles, and they are spinning the flax into a thread. They're holding what is called a distaff in one hand, in their left hand, and then turning the spindle in their right hand to be able to turn all of this into thread. So then you also have these 3 figures who are whose spindles have become full, and thus they are, oh no, sorry, these ladies over here, these ladies who are standing up against the wall, these ladies, their spindles have become full, and they are now stretching the newly spun thread on these pegs that are on the wall, and they are threading. And then finally, the 3 ladies who are down here, they are weaving at the 2 looms which lie on the floor and are kept taut by pegs that are actually driven into the floor. And there are multiple different types of weaving techniques, including ones that are, there's like something called a vertical and a horizontal loom, and some of these go like this on the ground. This is interesting that it's being pegged into the ground. I don't know if that's how it would have been done. I mean, I'm assuming so. If these are models, I'm assuming that most of the things that we see here is how it was literally done, rather than making a physical wooden loom that would sit on the floor. This is like attached to the floor, kind of. Most of the figures, again, here have those painted on clothes, but there are quite a few women that have these linen clothing that are on top of the painted versions of their clothes, which is very interesting. And very, very similar, albeit I will say identical, there is another house and garden. I don't understand why there are 2. It's really weird because I'm 99% sure they are completely and utterly identical. The weirdest thing is that it's hard to tell if they're not the same. I know they're not the same because I know the Metropolitan Museum of Art has one, and I know that the Egyptian Museum has one. But it becomes even more intriguing as to why there are 2. We do know, we did see that there were duplicate types of boats, potentially those papyrus boats that are doing that journey to Abydos. But I really don't know why there would be 2 models of this thing, unless he really loved his house. And this has the same thing. It has the lotiform columns in the front. It has the papyriform columns in the back. It has brilliant paint, and it has these sycamore fig trees with red figs in the trees. So I don't know why there are 2 of these, but there are 2, and I have seen 2 in person, and it's just really weird to think about, but there are. So we'll think on that for a little bit. Now, I did sort of save the best for last, and it is the best for last. It is quite literally a very, very, very famous piece. This is the cattle inspection, or the cattle counting scene. This is the largest of the models. It's quite long and large, and it is very famous because it is very, very unique. Like all the things that we have seen before, the boats, there are model boats. We have seen those before. We have seen breweries and bakeries and granaries and stuff like that. But this is kind of rare. Having something this beautiful is rare. So this is either called the inspection of the cattle or the cattle counting scene. And this essentially has depicted a courtyard where there is this small canopy. You have Meketre here in the center, you have presumably his son, and then you have 3 scribes next to him that are, or 4 scribes, there's a 4th one that I can't see. There are 4 scribes here who are all counting all the different cattle that are going by. There also are even guards. There are guards on either side. There's actually like 4 or 5 guards. There are actually 6. There's 2, 1, 2, and then 2. There's guards on either side, showing, hey, Meketre had a lot of prestige and he needed to be protected, which is crazy and amazing to kind of see that. So then the rest of it is essentially these different farmers and herdsmen are preceding all of these cattle down in front while the scribes are recording how many cattle there are. And this is essentially used for inspection purposes and to make sure that potentially this could be an estate that Meketre was an overseer of, and that he would have to go and literally oversee these estates to make sure that they are keeping up with the numbers that are needed to feed society in a way. So this is him literally just overseeing all the cattle. I think the cows are so goddamn cute because they're just a little derpy. And they all have these big horns, which if you saw back at the slaughterhouse image and like the other image, their horns are not nearly as long as these ones. These ones have like very long and tall horns. But it also shows, hey, cattle come in such a interesting variety of colors in ancient Egypt. Like it shows us that like cattle, like there were black and white cows like that are kind of the typical, at least in my mind, like the typical American cow, or like if you draw a cow, it's going to be a black and white spotted cow. But there's a very interesting range of colors. There's like a full brown cow. There's the black and white cow. There's also a white on black cow. And then there's also these ones that have pretty tiny little spots. And then the brown on white cows. And here's like a fully black one. And so like it's a lovely mixture of all the different colors of cows. See my entire, like whenever I have seen a cow in real life, it is always a black and white spotted one because of where I live in the world. And it is true. It is definitely true in certain parts of the world, cattle, like I'm sure people who grow up in different parts of the world, if I said to them cow, they are going to come up with a different image of a cow. Like obviously like there's the Highland cows and stuff like that, but like in my mind as a American who grew up on the East Coast in a state that does have a somewhat of a cattle, not really close to where I live, but semi close to where I live, I am going to think of the white on black cow. This guy right here. Not really with the horns. Also, no, not a lot of horns on these cows. But that's the thing. It's kind of like depends on where you grow up. The Highland cows in Scotland have all the hair on it, and they are brown. There are obviously the black cattle. There's it just depends. It just depends on the world. So that is all I have for you guys today. I think we'll go briefly while I take any questions that you guys have. We'll go and let me go pull up some of the Metropolitan Museum of Art images so that we can actually like look at them a little bit more detailedly. Like, let's do this. So this is the garden that's at the Met. You can see the two different papyriform columns. And just like the little individual leaves and all the little red blossoms. Thank you, Nat. And Cole Watusi cows. Thank you, guys. I'm excited about this one because I love these models. These models are just genuinely gorgeous. Yeah, so here you can really see the doors and the windows and the carvings and the colors. The colors are amazing on this piece. And look at the little spouts. Yeah, Cass, they have a really large space for them because they have pretty much all of the ones that are at, so I talked about half the finds from this excavation were divided in half by the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. So almost everything, all the big models that are from Meketre's tomb, they're on display at the Met. Let's see. Let's go pull up another one. Let's go. This is the sporting boat. So this is the little guy standing here. He's in charge of the rudder. Here we go, Meketre. Here's the lady with the goose. Here's this guy. They just speared this giant fish. And this guy has, I think these are ducks, all strung up on a string. And is this another fish? It might be. And these guys are the ones sailing. Here's the other side. Yeah, so he's spearing another big fish. Oh, look at him! He's got a little harpoon with a rope on it. Isn't it cute? Oh, see, do you see that? It's actually rearranged. Between these two photos, it's different. In this photo, this guy is moving this way with whatever this is. I'm assuming a fish. But in this photo, which is older, the guy is standing next to him. They moved some of the guys. They moved this guy to the front. Yeah, they did. They moved him to the front. So it does, because this was found, I think that some of these pieces are not, we don't exactly know where some of the statues may have been. If they're not fully attached to the piece, I think a lot of them fell over, and so I think there is the potential that they can be moved around, sort of. So it looks like the Met has moved some of these around, interestingly. Especially because they also took pictures of them off the boat as well. Oh yeah, it does say Fowler. Yeah, Fowler and Harpooner. So it's a guy who with the birds and a guy with the, what's it called? Oh yeah, let's look at her. Because she is gorgeous. Just genuinely gorgeous. Also, their photos are so high res, it's just like ridiculous. I love how you can just see the wood grain. Oh, look at this. You can see the pegs. So she's quite a large statue, and so you wouldn't have been able to make this out of one solid piece of wood. So her arm attaches here. You can see the line where the paint is kind of chipped away, and there are the two pegs that were used to attach her arm to her. There's a little duck. Still alive, apparently, because she's holding him by his wings. And it looks like her foot was attached, but there's a crack there now. Love the little anklets. I want to see, I think they have a photo of what's in her basket. Can't remember. Oh, the detail. It's so detailed. You can even see like the paintbrush strokes. God, it's so detailed. Oh, it doesn't have a thing. It has meat in it, but I guess it doesn't have a picture of what's in her basket. No, I need artworks on display. Let's go into the granary. Ooh. See, look at their tiny little scribble palette. How cute are they? You can even see that they put like the red paint and the black paint, which are like the two ink colors they would use. Were ducks the chickens of Egypt? Yes. I don't believe they actually had chickens, but they had a ton of ducks and a ton of geese as well. And see, look at the tiny little bits of grain in the granary. And there's even a little hole over here. And this guy's hauling in a little sack of it. Just like amazing. You can't have your scribes going inkless. It is very true. I love these guys. These guys crack me up. But yeah, so this guy is using papyrus and this guy is using, sorry, I had to crop this. And this guy is using just like a wooden piece. Think that they were modern models, of course. This always happens. People always are questioning that whether or not they're real or not. See, look at this old picture. This is probably when it was found. Look at all the pieces, the material that was actually inside of it when it was found. Looks like some of it's definitely been removed. But granted, the ceiling did kind of collapse over this area, so potentially that might not all be. And I love this. Somebody at the Met decided to take these really cute candid photos through the doorways, and it cracks me up. They're so funny. See, these guys have the little wigs, but a lot of the other guys don't. These are probably some of the only ones that have the wigs. I need to find... Why is my mouse disappearing? No, I need to go back. What? Oh, not highlights. I need... Oh no. No. Don't show me the relief fragments. Here are all the relief fragments, guys. Meketre model. Okay, here we go. Let's do the bakery. Let's do the bakery and the brewery. Like, look at these little guys with their flour. Like, they're rolling all the stuff. Humans have always humaned and made cute stuff. Oh God, friend in arms. Then you can go through all of the. Oh my God, I can't talk. Friend in arms, then you can go through all the relief fragments that are in black and white photos or no photos at all. So see, this is what I was talking about with what I think is like a wood dye or like a wood stain, because it doesn't come out evenly on any of these figures and gives them this very interesting, and maybe this is like, I don't know, this could be maybe some sort of oil or some sort of like sealant that was on these pieces and now is making the color look weird. But it's very interesting. So these are the ladies grinding the grain. And this guy is the one who's making the little bread loaves. And this is the guy in the little oven. Which is just like too precious. And so then... So this is the guy who's smashing the grain up. This guy is making these... Essentially you would make dough like you were making bread, and then you would add water to it to then like liquefy it. to then put it in through the fermenting process. I'm thinking it might be some sort of varnish that is aging not well, but it wouldn't have been modern varnish. This is still like an ancient Egyptian varnish or something. But I'm very curious about it. But see how their feet, look at their feet. Each of their feet are totally made separately. Their feet are made out of like stucco. They're like made out of like clay almost, maybe to attach them to like the ground. But their feet are not wooden. It's very weird. I wonder if it was because... I'm wondering if it was because these were carved out of solid wood, and if you carved the feet, they would become weak, and the feet would break off, and so they were worried about that. That is true. The figures did do their job. So yeah, here they go. They're smashing the grain. The women are grinding it. These guys are making the dough, and then these guys are baking it. Yeah, so here they are. They're kind of adding the water to make the dough. I love these guys. These two are my two favorite. Like, look at all the different shapes of dough that they're making. Yeah, I think that's probably what it is that the clay, and then you could seal them in. A little window shot. This is definitely interesting though, because it definitely shows like which positions a man versus a woman may have actually been able to participate in, and that it might have been different in some ways. Is there one down here? No, we already looked at the granary. Which one do I want? I want to look at the slaughterhouse one. So this is what it looks like with the roof on it, and it has this little window thing that you kind of look into it, which I think is just so cool. And these shots like through the windows are just so detailed and so good. So here's like our overseer who's watching this. Here's the guy who's cutting the bull's throat, and here's the guy who's sopping it all up with a bowl. And this is like the inside view. I just love it. It's like dollhouses. I think it's so creative for them to do that. And then they're boiling some sort of blood pudding, which I don't think would have been eaten. I'm wondering if it's like more medicinal of some sort. And then all the different little meats. They look like salmon, but I know they're supposed to be meats, obviously. Am I missing one? No. I'm missing the boats. I'm looking, maybe I'll look for is this the kitchen boat? Yeah, this is the kitchen boat. We're gonna look at this one. I think that's gonna be the last one. Yeah, maybe they're flounder. Maybe they might be fish. Yeah, it looks like I think that they would mostly do that. I don't doubt that maybe they would have smoked some stuff as well. But maybe it's kind of either or. So here we have all of the people working on the kitchen boat. So the little guy tending the fire with like the soup boiling. We got the woman grinding the grain. We got the guy making the brewing stuff. All sitting next to all of the rowers, which their oars are tied up here. They're actually not in their hands, which is interesting. And I love this guy. Just like looking in. I think that is where we're gonna end. Do we have any last questions about Meketre, about models, about the Middle Kingdom, about anything at all? Anything at all? That's a very good question. I don't think there are as many. Let me just do a quick Google. Um, so there is a Wikipedia page. Obviously, look at the sources when you're looking at it. Yes, this tomb is Middle Kingdom, 11th Dynasty. So there is this Wikipedia page. I'm so glad you liked it. Thank you. That kind of talks about tomb models and how they've kind of changed over time. Most of them in the Old Kingdom were like a single figure, and then in the Middle Kingdom they become these much more elaborate pieces. And then it briefly just says late Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom. It says during the reign of Senusret III, the use of wooden models in tombs declined and then are no longer found. However, frequently included in the discussion of Middle Kingdom models are several model boats that have been found in New Kingdom royal burials, most notably the burial of Tutankhamun, which I did not even know. Tutankhamun's flotilla included 35 boats, which this is an image. But, I hate to say it, this is not like the boats that we saw. This is just a model of a boat. This is not like this is not the same. I don't think, because there are no people on this boat, I don't think it carries the same credence. So I'm not sure if there are other, like it says there are 35. I've never even heard it. I'm gonna look at it. Tutankhamun's model boats. Whoa, okay. Okay. So I've seen this one. I know this one before. Oh yeah, here we go. So looking at like this. I don't think they carry the same credence as the ones that we would see in the Middle Kingdom, because that is a great question. I don't know what a flotilla is. I just read that off of Wikipedia. I think they are. I think they are representing possibly ships that he had in real life, or the other thing is that they possibly could represent. There is a thing that the ancient Egyptians sort of believed that their possessions might come alive in the afterlife, so this could be the physical boat. But because there are no people on the boat, you would essentially have to rely on the shopties. Tutankhamun had a shit ton of shopties, and they were beautiful and they were huge. So you would rely on the shopties to be able to do your bidding, rather than in the sense that these Middle Kingdom tombs, these models, were meant for the people that are on the boat, though they are meant to do this thing, if that makes sense. Were there wooden figures in pharaohs' tombs? Yes and no. There were definitely things that would be similar in pharaohs' tombs, but unfortunately we do not have enough pharaohs' tombs with their objects surviving to know. Especially Middle Kingdom, guys. We do not have... We have very little Middle Kingdom pharaohs. We have very little pharaohs' tombs that are preserved at all. It truly... Tutankhamun's is the best. There's also the treasures of Tanis, but unfortunately anything that was made out of wood in the treasures of Tanis would not have survived. Why have no ancient Egyptian crowns have been found? That is a very good question. We do not know the answer to that, but there are a couple theories. One of them is that they were made out of organic material that would not have survived in a wet or dry environment. So they could have been made out of reeds. They could have been made out of like papyrus or something, or some sort of like paper mache-ish kind of thing, and they just don't survive. The more than likely answer is that they were either ritualistically destroyed in some sort of ritual, that like when a pharaoh died, they destroy his crown and they create a new crown for the person, or they could have been passed down, and thus you would not find them in the tomb of a pharaoh. You would get them passed down to later people, and thus, because we don't have enough pharaohs' tombs being preserved, we do not have any crowns being preserved because they were never buried. They were just continued on and on and on and on and on. There probably were not paper, because they don't have paper. It's only papyrus, and you could make a papyrus. You probably could make a small miniature papyrus boat, which I think I've seen before. Let me see. Ancient papyrus boat model. I think I have seen. No, that's not a real one. I'm trying to think. I feel like I've seen. I could have sworn that I've seen at least like that. Is that real? I don't know if this is real. No, I don't think that's real. I don't think that's ancient. I feel like I have seen things like that. But papyrus, again, is an organic material, and it's going to rot away very quickly. So you're not really going to see it. Like, here's an image of what an actual papyrus boat would look like. So yeah, there's definitely the possibility that some of those could have been left in poorer people's tombs, and then just not survived. It's definitely possible. Yeah, I could have sworn I have at least seen one, but maybe I'm dreaming.